Enter the early 1200s, when news moved no faster than a galloping horse. One morning, a caravan leaves Samarkand. By nightfall, rumor outruns the gates. The Mongols are coming. They arrive not in weeks, but in hours. Trebuchets, engineered in the Chinese tradition, slam stones heavier than men into city walls. Smoke rolls across markets and temple roofs. Survivors are chained in columns that snake beyond the ruins. Chroniclers like Atamalik Juvayni wrote of pyramids of skulls raised at the gates, messages carved from bone that no one could mistake. These were not raiders passing in the night. They were an army with a plan. Under Genghis Khan and his heirs, the Mongols built the largest contiguous land empire in recorded history, about 24 million square kilometers. Estimates vary. By 1279, they governed over 100 million people. Estimates vary. Binding steppe and city, forest and desert, under a single chain of command. And yet, scale alone does not explain what followed. The Mongols were a system as much as an army, discipline that outpaced distance, intelligence that turned enemies against themselves, and a style of war designed to break a city's will before its walls. How did a boy born into exile on the windswept steppe forge the most feared war machine of the medieval world? And why did his empire unravel within a century? To answer, we return to the steppe, where survival was the only law. The Mongols' story begins not with triumph, but with survival. Around 1162, near the Anan River, a boy named Temujin was born to Yesugei, a chieftain of the Borjigin clan. When Yesugei was poisoned by rivals, Temujin's family was abandoned. His mother, Hoalun, dug roots and stripped bark to keep her children alive. Temujin trapped birds and rodents. Later chronicles remembered this as a childhood of hunger and humiliation. The steppe was merciless. Tribes raided each other for herds. Loyalty shifted like the wind. As a teenager, Temujin was captured by a rival clan, forced into a heavy wooden collar, paraded as a slave. He escaped, and from that moment, swore never again to bow to another man's power. What set him apart was vision. Temujin saw that endless blood feuds kept the tribes weak, prey for the Jin dynasty in the south and the Khwarezmian Empire in the west. Unity was not just ambition, it was survival. He built power with both generosity and fear. He rewarded warriors for skill rather than birth, raising even outcasts to command, while punishing betrayal with ruthless precision. By the 1190s, he commanded thousands. His forces were organized into a strict decimal system: squads of 10, hundreds, thousands, and 10,000s. This structure gave his army flexibility few others possessed. Each warrior carried multiple horses, covering up to 100 miles a day, and their bows and ambush tactics broke armies many times their size. In 1206, after 2 decades of war, Temujin defeated his last rivals. At a great Kurultai by the Anan River, under banners snapping in the wind, he was proclaimed Genghis Khan, universal ruler. For the first time, the steppe was united under one will. The world felt his power almost immediately. In 1211, the Mongols invaded the Jin dynasty. By 1215, Zhengdu, modern Beijing, was in flames. To the west, the Khwarezmian Shah made a fatal mistake when he executed Mongol envoys. From 1219 to 1221, Mongol armies stormed Bukhara, Samarkand, and Urgench. Chroniclers claimed rivers ran red, entire populations vanished. Yet conquest was paired with order. Genghis built a chain of yam relay stations for couriers and issued paisa tablets that gave merchants safe passage. For the first time, caravans could move from the Caspian Sea to China under one authority. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, after a campaign against the Tangut Kingdom of Western Shah, he left behind more than victories: a disciplined army, a code of law, and a network that made distance an ally. His heirs would now carry that vision farther, into Persia, Baghdad, and even the heart of Europe. By the mid-13th century, the Mongols had risen from obscurity to dominate half the known world. From Siberia to Persia, Korea to Hungary, their dominion stretched farther than any before in history. After Genghis Khan's death in 1227, his heirs carried his vision outward. The empire divided into four great khanates: the Golden Horde in Russia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Yuan dynasty in China. Each ruled semi-independently, but all still claimed the prestige of the Great Khan. In 1241, Europe itself trembled. Under Batu Khan and the strategist Subutai, Mongol armies swept west. At the Battle of Legnica in Poland, a coalition of knights was annihilated. Duke Henry II of Silesia was slain, his severed head raised on a spear. Days later in Hungary, at the Battle of Mohi, Subutai built pontoon bridges across the Sajo River, lured the Hungarians into crossing, then encircled them in a night assault. By dawn, tens of thousands lay dead. Chroniclers in Paris and Vienna whispered that the Tatars might soon ride into their streets. Only the sudden death of Ogedei Khan forced the generals to retreat for a new election. Europe was spared not by strength, but by timing. In the east, Mongol power reached its grandest transformation under Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis. By 1279, after decades of war, he completed the conquest of the southern Song dynasty, proclaiming the Yuan dynasty with its capital at Khanbalik, modern Beijing. Here, the steppe warrior became emperor of a sedentary civilization. Visitors like Marco Polo marveled at a city of gilded palaces and vast markets, richer than anything in Europe. Paper money circulated. Artisans from Persia and Central Asia worked in the court, and scholars from across continents debated in its halls. For the first time, China was integrated into a global empire. But Mongol glory lay not only in conquest, it lay in connection. The Silk Road thrived under the Pax Mongolica. Yam relay stations stretched across thousands of miles. Paisa passports allowed merchants to travel in safety. Venetian glass, Indian gems, Persian medicine, and Chinese gunpowder all flowed across the same roads. For a brief moment, Eurasia was linked as one. And yet, the limits of Mongol expansion soon became clear. In 1258, Ulugh Khan's forces stormed Baghdad, toppling the Abbasid Caliphate's power in the city. Chroniclers claim the Tigris ran black with ink from shattered libraries and red with blood from the slain. It was a symbol of Mongol dominance, but also of devastation that shocked the Islamic world. Other campaigns ended in failure. Kublai twice tried to conquer Japan with the largest fleets the world had seen, only to lose everything to the kamikaze or divine winds. In Vietnam, General Tran Hung Dao lured Mongols into the Red River Delta and destroyed their fleet at Bac Dang River in 1288. These defeats showed the limits of Mongol power beyond the steppe. The message was clear. The Mongols were unstoppable on the open plains, but vulnerable in jungles, mountains, and seas. Expansion had its limits. Still, by the late 13th century, it seemed the Mongols had remade the world. They were no longer mere raiders. They were emperors, administrators, and global architects. But beneath the gilded palaces and thriving trade, corruption, greed, and plague were already gathering to bring them down. Beneath the grandeur of palaces and the hum of markets, the empire was beginning to rot from within. In China, after Kublai Khan's death in 1294, the Yuan dynasty faltered. His successors lacked his vision. Chroniclers describe courts consumed with feasts, extravagant hunts, and endless construction projects that drained the treasury. Corruption seeped into every layer of government. Offices were sold to the highest bidder, and justice became a commodity. The economy cracked under reckless monetary policy. The yuan printed vast amounts of paper money, chow, without sufficient reserves to back it, leading to periods of severe inflation. Confidence collapsed. For peasants already devastated by Yellow River floods and famine, Mongol taxes were unbearable. Rebellions simmered across the countryside. In Persia, the Ilkhanate mirrored this decline. Under Genghis Khan, reigned from 1295 to 1304, reforms and a state conversion to Islam brought brief stability. But his successors faltered. Religious tolerance narrowed. Minorities once protected now faced persecution, and trade faltered. Chroniclers noted deserted villages, caravans halted by extortion, and famine spreading across lands once rich with grain. Even the Mongol elite turned on itself. The once unifying name of Genghis Khan no longer bound his heirs. Cousins betrayed cousins. Khans ignored central authority. Alliances shifted with the seasons. The empire, once a single system, now resembled four competing kingdoms. Terror, once their sharpest weapon, became excess. Cities razed for spectacle, subjects cowed into resentment. Then came the deadliest blow: plague. Along the same trade routes that carried silk and gunpowder, the Black Death spread. In 1346, during the siege of Kaffa on the Black Sea, some chroniclers claimed Mongol besiegers catapulted plague-ridden corpses into the city. Historians debate the details, but the symbolism is haunting. The empire that connected the world also carried its death. Within decades, tens of millions perished across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Armies withered. Revenues collapsed. Morale disintegrated. By the mid-14th century, the Mongols faced a perfect storm: corruption, famine, rebellion, succession disputes, and plague. The unity that had once made them unstoppable now crumbled, and one by one, the great Khanates would fall. No empire collapses in a single night. The Mongol dominion unraveled, thread by thread, until little remained but memory. China fell first. The Yuan dynasty, Kublai Khan's great creation, was crippled by corruption, inflation, and natural disaster. Floods of the Yellow River devastated farmland. Famine spread across the countryside. The imperial court in Khanbalik, Beijing, ignored the suffering, consumed with intrigue and luxury. In 1351, the Red Turban Rebellion erupted. Peasants, monks, and secret societies rose up, binding scraps of red cloth around their heads so families could recognize the dead. For nearly 2 decades, rebellion consumed northern China. Finally, in 1368, rebel forces stormed Khanbalik. The last Yuan emperor fled north into the steppe, never to return. In his place, the Ming dynasty rose, determined to erase Mongol rule and fortify the frontier with the Great Wall, much of which still stands today. Persia fractured earlier. After the death of Abu Sa'id Bahadur Khan in 1335, the Ilkhanate splintered. Without a strong heir, provinces fell to rival warlords and shifting allegiances. Into this chaos stepped Timur, known in the West as Tamerlane. Claiming Chinggisid legitimacy through marriage as Gurgen, son-in-law, he built his own brutal empire atop Mongol ruins. Russia resisted longest. For 2 centuries, the Golden Horde extracted tribute from Slavic princes. But its grip loosened as Moscow rose in power. In 1380, at the Battle of Kulikovo, Prince Dmitry Donskoy rallied a coalition that defeated a Mongol army in open battle. Though the horde returned to raid, the aura of invincibility was broken. A century later, in 1480, at the standoff known as the Great Stand on the Ugra River, Ivan III of Moscow refused to pay tribute. Facing a united Russian host, the Mongols withdrew without a fight. Their centuries-long domination of Russia was finished. Central Asia, the empire's birthplace, fared no better. The Chagatai Khanate fractured into petty states, each ruled by tribal chieftains with no loyalty beyond their own banners. The very heartland of the steppe, the crucible of Mongol power, dissolved into a patchwork, easy prey for Timur's campaigns and later for other rising powers. By the dawn of the 15th century, the empire of Genghis Khan, once stretching from the Pacific to the Mediterranean, was gone. What remained were fragments bearing his name, but not his strength. The Mongols had not been toppled in a single decisive war. They were undone by slower, deeper forces: succession disputes, corruption, famine, rebellion, and plague. Their greatest strength, speed and terror, could not sustain them against the weight of governance. The empire that once burned the world had finally consumed itself. Yet even in ashes, the Mongols left behind a legacy that reshaped history. Though the Mongol Empire collapsed, its shadow still stretches across history. Few powers rose so quickly, burned so brightly, and vanished so completely, yet left behind such lasting marks. Their first and most enduring legacy was connection. Under the Pax Mongolica, merchants could travel from the Mediterranean to the Pacific under a single authority. Yam relay stations provided fresh horses for couriers. Paisa tablets, engraved with Mongol seals, guaranteed safe passage. Even after the empire fractured, these routes endured, shaping global commerce for centuries. Ideas traveled those same roads: gunpowder, paper money, the compass, printing, all spread more widely thanks to Mongol networks. Islamic astronomy merged with Chinese mathematics. Persian medicine flowed east. Chinese engineering influenced Middle Eastern architecture. Knowledge that crossed Mongol highways helped prepare Europe for the Renaissance. The Mongols also transformed warfare. Their composite bows, feigned retreats, and decimal military organization made cavalry a weapon of precision. Their speed and discipline shocked medieval armies and inspired later powers, from the Ottomans to Napoleon. Their impact reshaped nations. In Russia, centuries of tribute hardened Muscovy's centralized autocratic traditions, paving the way for the rule of the czars. In China, the fall of the Yuan dynasty spurred the Ming to rebuild and expand the Great Wall, determined never again to bow to steppe conquerors. In Persia and the Middle East, the sack of Baghdad in 1258 ended the Abbasid Caliphate's political authority in the city. A ceremonial line survived only under the Mamluks in Cairo. It was both catastrophe and turning point, remembered with trauma, but also as a shift into a new era. Yet their legacy was a paradox. The same roads that carried silk also carried the Black Death, which killed perhaps a third of Europe's population. Their policies of religious tolerance coexisted with acts of extermination. They were both patrons of trade and destroyers of civilizations. Today, the name Genghis Khan is spoken with pride in Mongolia, resentment in China, and fear in the Middle East. His palaces are gone, his banners turned to dust, but the networks he forged, the borders he shifted, and the echoes of his campaigns still shape our world. The Mongols remind us that no empire is eternal. Even the fiercest blaze burns itself out, and the true measure of an empire lies not only in what it conquers, but in what survives when the fire is gone.